Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Force with some more WildStar coverage. In today's video, I will be taking you through the second of the level 20 dungeons. This is the Ruins of Kel Voreth. Consider this video a primer talking about the mechanics of the different trash packs as well as the boss fights, and I'll also give you my thoughts and impressions on the dungeon. Just straight out the gate, I want to say I do find this one a bit more challenging for pugs especially than the first one we looked at, which was Storm Talon's Lair, but let's go ahead and talk about the mechanics. You start off getting thrown into this arena in which you have to fight a few trash packs, the first of which are these big melee guys. He's got a few summons with him, a few adds, and the only big thing to worry about here is that he does this big sweeping arc attack, and I think if the fight lasts long enough, they also will start jumping randomly towards people, but not too hard. We cleared that first one, and then a second one. Then after that, we were faced up against this necromancer character. So she will summon 3 skeletons, and then she also does this pull mechanic. So you just want to make sure you've got aggro on the skeletons. I actually think I lose it here for a second, and then I pick it right back up. But then this is the pull mechanic, and then a radial sweep will push out from her. Try to avoid that damage. If you can back up, dodge roll, if you've got a movement ability, that works as well. As you can see, one of our group members here actually ended up dying to that. It's fairly easy to avoid as long as you're paying attention. I was backpedaling there. The reason for that was I wanted to make sure, as long as I was safe and out of the red, that I was still dealing damage and applying threat to the mob that we were attacking. So, you know, if I would suggest if you're just a DPS character, just focus 100% on getting out of that red telegraph. To make sure you don't take any damage, because it's really important for characters who aren't the main tank to avoid damage as much as possible. Now on to the first boss, Grand the Corpse Maker, this giant dog-looking creature. He's got a couple of things that he does, the first of which is he will do this front attack that's in a large cone. If you're not the tank, don't get hit by that. If you are the tank, face it away from your group. The second thing is this big kickback. Now it can be interrupted, and you should be doing that. I actually kind of yell at my group here for not paying attention. You notice my character not attacking and me furiously typing. Right before the fight, I said, guys, there's this big kickback. It's super obvious. There's a huge telegraph. Try to interrupt that. And I think I was the only one who cast an interrupt there. So yeah, not too good if that's not happening. So the second time around, though, we are going to get the interrupt. It actually gets applied right there. And beyond stopping something from happening, interrupts are really important in this game because the mob becomes stunned and you apply additional damage to it. So you always want to interrupt a cast whenever possible when you can coordinate that with your group. There's a third thing that he does. He'll eventually lie down and summon a few adds. Unfortunately, though, this time around we didn't get to that phase because we killed him too fast. So once you move past the first boss, you're then going to move into this portion of the instance, a very futuristic technology thing. There were these big beams that shoot these red lasers down on the ground, which will get in the way of your fights. So if you find them annoying, you can shut them off like you just saw me do here. And here's the first trash pack after the first boss. He's got 2 little droids that are floating behind him. Those can eventually explode, and then they also just ping for some damage. But he himself will summon this giant green laser beam. That's a great time to interrupt. Remember, even if you're you can dodge this one. So you don't have to interrupt it. You're going to see it apply here in just 1 second. So there it is, telegraphs on the ground, and then boom, this super huge laser beam just blowing people's faces. If you stand in there, you're going to die after a couple of ticks. But that is something that can be interrupted, and like I mentioned before, even if you can dodge a mechanic of one of these trash packs, still interrupt because you get the stun and you get that bonus damage, which is going to allow you to kill them faster. The next type of trash pack we have here, we've got this big melee character with a hammer. He himself is not that much of a pain in the butt. The problem is this little droid that he's with will rejuvenate. He will cast a heal over time. Very important to try to interrupt it, otherwise these packs are just going to take that much longer because the heal is very strong, and at this level it will outpace your damage. So try to make sure that you're interrupting that. He actually just started casting it. But then it stopped because we killed the mob that he was trying to target with it. Beyond the rejuvenate, these floating drones will also cast these little dual blades, which they'll ping out. And oh, and those are the green beams I was telling you about. If you don't shut them off, they're going to target you during fights. So you can avoid them, it's fine, but it'll make it a little easier if you go up to shut those off. And then here we've got a few different types of caster packs in this dungeon. This particular one summons these spikes up from the ground. There's also a second, like a defile ground ability that she casts. Yeah, this one right here. Just, you know, it does a lot of damage, so try to coordinate those interrupts. So it's gonna sound like a broken record. It's kind of ultra important if your group can do that. That you do. So, okay, so we do that, and then there's just a few more. These are the ones that we fought earlier. You guys have seen this. There's nothing new to explain about that. A couple more mobs before we move on to the second of the boss fights. This one can be incredibly challenging, so make sure that your group understands these various phases, and I'll walk you through it right here. This boss is the Slave Master Drago. So it starts off, no problem, tank and spank. He'll shoot some red stuff on the ground. It's small, avoid that. But then after a few seconds, you're gonna move on to the second phase, the second part, which was he's gonna bring out these drones. Now, they spread out across the floor. Go to the door, and you need to DPS down this one drone as fast as possible, because all of them then spread out and explode, completely encompassing the area. But if you kill one, then they don't do that, and you can safely avoid it. However, many times with pickup groups, that does not end up working out, and if you don't DPS down in time, your entire group is going to blow up. All right, and then after that, he comes back out, a little more tanking and spanking, and then he teleports you back and tethers you to this little totem. Now, at this point, a couple things are happening. He's dropping red on people's heads, and then there's this pulsating one that moves out. If you stand on the opposite side of where that's coming from, you can avoid that. You can also dodge those if you're paying attention, but during this phase, you're tethered to that totem until you DPS it down, and when you break through yours, go help out your buddies, especially the healers might have a hard time. He's going to continue to do this slamming on the ground. It's pretty easy to dodge so long as you're paying attention. You can stand in it for a second, it builds up, and then it explodes. It'll deal damage and stun you, so just make sure that you can stand on top of it, but just make sure you're dodging before that explosion happens. Now, all of that, those three phases repeat themselves. So he comes out, the tank and spank like you just saw, and then a second phase with the drones. We're fighting the drones by the door. These are actually different types of drones or droids, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. But in this phase, you will periodically have one group member marked. Now, if the marked person gets within melee range of any of these guys that are coming out of this door here, they will literally instantly explode. No joke. You will instantly explode if you are marked and you're standing next to one of these. In fact, the mark will switch, and if you're not paying attention, you'll see what happens in just 1 second. You will instantly explode. So one of my group members, I even called it out. I was like, it's gonna switch, pay attention, and they still stood there, and that was a problem. So again, as I show you here, if you stand in it before that pulsing beam fills up, you can dodge it. It's when it fills up, then it pops and explodes. So yeah, some people have a hard time with it, and it's so funny because the different red telegraphs can mean different things, but anytime you see a red telegraph building up, you're usually safe in it until that buildup is complete. That's sort of a general rule of thumb that I've found. And then this phase just gets a little hectic because multiple things are happening, and now he's doing the pulse out. We also have these drones coming out, and they're gonna move out and do an expanding red beam. It's a very large one, so once they settle and start expanding, just move away from them. They will expand and explode. And then this pulsating one is still happening. He's also dropping on the heads, and then these drones keep coming out. It gets a little crazy. We were actually down to just 3 men at this point in this particular run, but we ended up finishing it up because the last 3 that we had figured stuff out, so it wasn't too much of a problem. Also end up popping a couple of cooldowns when I move away from my healer, but there you go. The second boss fight's quite the doozy. Lots of fun though as a result. Okay, so you finish him, and then we're moving on. We've got an entirely new array of trash. This particular character, similar to the one at this particular trash pack is similar to the one that was at the very start of the run. This is a gladiator. He's just gonna smack your tank in the face. He's got a couple of ads. It looks like they explode or they do some sort of damage. There is a red telegraph on the ground for them, and he will eventually do this leaping attack. So don't worry when you see this. If you're the tank, you haven't lost aggro, and if you're the DPS, just avoid where he's landing and you'll be all set. New trash pack here, a big guy with a hammer. he's got 2 dog friends. Now, the big guy with the hammer is going to do this big seismic slam. It'll stun you if you get stuck with it. It's a similar mechanic to the last boss that we just saw. However, it's much quicker in the build-up in each one of those rings, so you can dodge it. You just have to be a little bit more on your game. And these dogs, these guys will regenerate themselves. You see that little ham bone or whatever that was thrown out. You want to stun them when they're trying to eat that, otherwise they will replenish a lot of their health. But if you stun them, that's going to stop that from happening. And from here on out, there are several other trash packs that you can actually easily avoid. Now, even with bypassing these, I found the average run in this dungeon, considering wipes, if you're with a pickup group, to be around an hour. I would say that if you're with a good group and it's people who know the dungeon, you could probably run this with skipping these mobs in somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. But truthfully, a majority of my runs, because I don't have a set group and I've been pugging it all along, I get new people every time, and every time there's always someone who's inevitably new to the dungeon. Most of these runs have taken me in the vicinity of an hour, some of which actually end up going incomplete. The last boss can be quite difficult, and actually the second boss and the last boss, so 2/3 of this fight, are probably, they might be the 2 most challenging bosses that I've encountered in these 2 level 20 dungeons. And I showed you this mechanic, so there are various types of caster trash packs as you make your way to the boss fights. I actually showed you this particular engagement because it's a good example of what happens when your group isn't paying attention and doesn't interrupt to those big telegraphs, and that is that a majority of your group can die. I've talked about the difficulty of these early dungeons before, and the thing that separates this game from other MMOs leveling dungeons is that it requires all 5 group members to be paying attention 100% of the time. You know, I never really dealt with crazy boss mechanics or even especially trash mob mechanics in the leveling experience. Dead Mines wasn't this difficult, I guess, is an example that I want to give, you know. I love WoW PvE, I love the leveling experience, but the leveling dungeons were not nearly as demanding as the dungeons, the early level dungeons that I've experienced here in WildStar. Literally all 5 members of your group need to be paying attention all the time. Not only the healer and the tank, the DPS can't just face roll, they have to be paying attention for interrupts. Here we are, the last boss. This is Forge Master Trogan. He is a doozy. So at the very start, he's just gonna slam his hammer on his stand here. And it's so funny, the first time I did this run, I walked up to him because I'm the tank, and I was preparing to tank him, and he slammed his hammer on the ground, and me and the 2 melee DPS just died. So don't do that. Move forward to engage him, and then back up right before he slams his hammer down so you don't explode. Here we are in phase 1. Fire's raining down. You have to avoid that. He's gonna periodically slam his hammer in a large area that creates this ever-burning crater, so you just dodge out of that, and then you have to work around that, make sure your melee DPS still have room to engage. And then after this, he moves on to phase 2. He raises his hammer, and then we're going to see these golden orbs coming throughout the corners of the room towards him. You need to intercept these, stop them from getting to him. It gives him a huge buff, which will make the fight tremendously more difficult. So the best thing to do is just make sure that your group is spread up on either side of him when that phase happens. That way you can be certain that you pick up all those orbs and that none of them get to him. The more orbs that he gets, the stronger he gets, and then we move on. The first time I saw this, my mind was blown. Part 3 of this fight, hammer blows down, watch out for the red fireballs. It's pretty simple. The further back you stand, the better off you're going to be because the spheres aren't nearly as tightly packed together. You have to be careful with your camera though, because you end up abutting this wall back here, and when you do that, it makes it harder to see what's going on. But it's so awesome. It just looks so cool. It looks so cool. All right, so those are the first 3 phases, and then we've got a second round of them in which they get more intense, which seems to be a theme here. It was the same thing with the second boss. We've got phase 1, 2, and 3, and then it happens a second time, a little bit more difficult with a few things mixed up. So raining fire, big hammer smash. This time, however, once he goes into the orb collection phase, you still have to absorb them, but now there's also fireballs streaming out from him, or fire saws, or whatever those things are supposed to be. I did a terrible job here of dodging those, as you noticed. I think this was like my second run of this dungeon, so I was still getting used to the mechanics of this boss fight, but it's crazy. I do end up dying here right at the very end, but my group clears it no problem. Unfortunately, as the tank, I just end up number 5 and staying alive often because I'm often the first to die. I gotta say though, man, dungeon was a blast. I did find it more difficult in pickup groups because just things are a little more precise, even just with the trash packs. I felt like more wiping occurred with the trash packs in this dungeon as opposed to in Storm Talon's lair, but both of them equally as fun, incredibly challenging. Once more, to reiterate, just your group needs to pay attention. Pickup groups are gonna be a hassle, especially whenever there's a member who has never been in these runs before. You're gonna have to say every pack, make sure you interrupt this cast, and then you're gonna have to explain all of the boss fight mechanics because it's really difficult to go in there with even one member of your group blind and not potentially wipe. It's that punishing. And as a result, when you complete it, it's just that rewarding. I'm loving it. I've only seen 2 dungeons in this game. They are the earliest dungeons, the level 20 dungeons, and I already can't wait to see what the higher level content looks like because I'm having a blast. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this dungeon run video, talking over the mechanics, giving my impressions, having a great time. The open beta is coming to a close, but just a couple of weeks, we're gonna have the official launch of WildStar. Expect more coverage. I can't wait to play this game again. I'm having that much fun. Thanks a lot, guys. Hope you enjoy the content. I hope you have a fantastic day as well. Subscribe if you haven't already. Keep watching and keep owning.
What is it?